or from any other place, Julius? No.
No, we have
Mhm.
uh, not, especially there were people trying to join the
Trenton.
meeting.
Yeah, I saw it
Yes,
sometimes. Yeah.
before. But since now we are in the mode of recording,
Mhm.
so I will start to like opening this once more we are once more we are doing this monthly meeting. I think it is the 15th or so monthly African Human Forum meeting. And but this time I think it's a little bit like historical in a sense. Well, it is in the new year, and always in the new year we try to see what will be our aims for this occasion. And there's another thing happening in the universal humanist movement. Uh, Presenza, the international news agency, has been strengthening its presence all over the world last year, and now it is formal. There has been a formal partnership established. On one hand, Presenza partner is now a formal partner of the World Humanist Forum. So this is like a milestone in that now in this meeting we will try to start to have images as for the African Humanist Forum, because the African Humanist Forum is one of the regional forums within the World Humanist Forum. But for to know more about this, I ask you, Antonio, if you could, can you tell us more about this interesting development?
Yes, I mean about that material, you already sent it to about the forum. So
Uh,
no, not yet. No.
no, no. The idea was that we had a
A
like
discussion first, and then you will send it. Yeah,
discussion and an
yeah,
introduction
yeah,
first, and
yeah.
then we sent several materials relevant
There
to
is Alexander. No.
yeah.
Hi,
Well,
Alexander.
yeah, welcome, Alexander. Great to see you. Or we don't properly see you nor hear you. So how are you? Welcome.
I'm good. Hope everyone is okay in
Good.
here.
Yes, Happy New Year
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, and to
Alexander.
all of you, Happy New
to all of
Year.
you. Yes.
Yeah,
Happy New Year to all of you.
yeah. Thank you.
Happy
Thank
New
you.
Year to you too.
Yeah,
Same to you, Alexander.
yeah. So please, Antonio.
Yes, well, we have said to explain some more details about the forums that are going to take place in Africa and in Asia. They are going to take place because we are organizing them. So, so
Yeah,
if we fail completely, they will not happen. But because, as Julius was explaining, we are in a strong partnership with Presenza, our news agency. We will have enough dissemination, information, and publicity about all this, and also we will try to touch upon the issues to be discussed in the forum, the issues that are more central to humanity at this particular time. Just in this preliminary discussion that we had 5 minutes ago, we were saying that the culture is something that needs to change, the psychological culture, the social culture of people, because that violence that exists everywhere has to be first, awareness needs to be created about it. And secondly, each one of us, we have to actively work in the overcoming of our individual violence and violence around us, because we are the main actors of this historical time of change, because we know that we live in a system that is extremely violent, because they prey on violence, and is something that they need almost to the survival of their economies, etc., exporting arms, creating conflict, weakening some countries, destabilizing the currencies, and concentrating the wealth in the hands of few, etc. For that, they create all the time waves of turmoil. We don't think that is necessary because we think that the economy has to be managed in a solidarious manner, with solidarity. One of the responsibilities of governments in countries is to look after the people. Maybe some people will be more wealthy, but the important thing is that every citizen in a country, in a state, should have guaranteed the fundamental necessities for them and the families. That is housing, that is education, that is quality of life, that is health, etc. Those are human rights. That's why in 1949, after the Second World War, all the countries of the world agreed to this declaration, this Charter of Human Rights, and they all signed. And these same things that I am saying here were accepted by all, and they are enumerated. There are like 28 different rights that all the countries commit themselves to respect and to enforce. They don't do it. They don't do it. They say one thing and they do something else because, in essence, they don't care about people. After a war that killed 50 million people all over the world, of course, they were all shaken up and thinking that things should be made better, but they didn't do it. So it's a system, it's a political establishment in the world that is contradictory and is always lying to the people. So what they call democracy is just cheating the people. It's not a democracy because they do not enforce the fundamental rights of the people. And so democracy assumes that all citizens are treated equally. The same thing amongst countries, they don't treat each other equally. Some of the powerful countries, especially the Western countries, they have all the privileges and they have been robbing the poorer countries with the neo-colonial systems, with the corporations extracting all the wealth of these other countries. And they have been doing that forever, centuries of colonialism in Africa and in Latin America and in Asia. And there is just a handful of countries, that is the Western countries, who have benefit out of that, and the Americans obviously, and the European countries, and that's it. And some of their allies in other places, like the Australia, like Canada, like New Zealand, and Japan, of course. Japan was defeated after the war, and then they had to do what the masters tell them to do, the Americans. So again, it's a lie of them. All the rest, all the rest of the world, and those countries that I have named are about 14% of the population of the world, 14%. And all the rest, the other 85 or 86%, is what before they used to call the third world. Now they don't use those terms because they are very derogatory. But the reality is that is the world that is to be dominated, the post-colonial world, dominated by this 14%. And now things are changing because they are all the time instigating, they are conflicting China because China is growing thanks to the effort of and the capacity to self-organize. And of course, they are competing with the Americans and with the Western countries, and they have a huge population. China has 1.5 billion people. And that means that are people the ones who, through the work, create the wealth. When you have a population like that and people get organized and the fundamental necessities and rights are respected, of course, it's very powerful. And they will continue growing. In a few years' time, they will be the richest and the most powerful country in the world. And then the Americans, obviously, and the Europeans don't like that, but they need them because they can manufacture at cheaper prices than what they can. And so they have that ambiguity, and that creates conflict. And then they try to corner Russia. Russia is the largest country in the world in terms of territory. They have attacked in the last 200 years, they have attacked twice Russia. First, the French in the times of Napoleon in 1812. He took there 600,000 troops trying to control Russia because Russia extended at that time up to North America, with Alaska is a part of the territory that the Tsars, in the end of last previous century, they sold to the Americans. But otherwise, Russia would be connected to Canada in the north of North America. Imagine, they go from the Mediterranean almost to the Pacific. It's incredible, and continues being the largest country in the world. Extremely rich, has the biggest reserves of oil, and the Western countries are always very jealous with that. Then, in a few years back, in 1941, Hitler tried to do the same thing, and he moved millions of troops. They had the most powerful army in Europe, to the point that when Hitler attacked the West, in 1 month he had controlled everything, all surrendered. The Brits ran away to the UK, and they stayed there, where they came. The Americans came later on to support them. The French surrendered, and the Low Countries, I mean Belgium and um, yes, Holland, they also were invaded. The countries of Scandinavia, all of them surrendered in a matter of a month. They couldn't resist. And then Hitler concentrated his strength towards Russia. And they had a pact of non-aggression with the Russians. But of course, they didn't respect anything. And they went with the most aggressive manner and invaded the country with 4 or 5 million troops. Never before in history that number of troops have been mobilized. They had huge superiority. But the Russians started to organize in such a big country. They moved the capital and they moved all the industry to the Ural mountains, that they are not very high mountains, but very difficult to reach there because they were so far from Europe. And there they started to manufacture all the weapons and the things, and the country started to come back, come back, come back. And at one point, I mean, broke the attacks that they had organized in a big industrial city that was called Stalingrad. And finally, the German troops started to surrender and to retreat. And then they advanced over Berlin, and they took Berlin, and they had to wait there for 2 months until the Western troops, the Allies, managed to come also, because they had made an agreement with the Americans and the Allies that they would wait in Berlin in a certain latitude. They would not advance further, but they could have gone up to Portugal if they wanted. But they didn't want, because they knew through the spies, etc., that the Americans, they had just developed the atomic bomb. And Stalin knew that if he dared, I mean, challenge them in that way, they would give them a justification to be bombed with atomic bombs. That would have been horrible. Well, they didn't have many yet, but I mean, they would have done it, the Americans. But I am telling you a bit how the story of the relationship of the Western countries, the small number of Western countries, has been always conflictive with the East, with China and Russia. Everything that is culturally different to them, they immediately want to attack, destroy, and control. And with those ancient cultures, with thousands of years of experience and different cultural cycles, imagine China has a culture of 5,000 years old, where they had empires, they have lots of technology, etc. The Americans, I mean, they were a colony of the Brits. I mean, they are fairly recent, and the Brits were a colony of Rome. And so in comparative terms, they are recent, all these Western countries. And compared to the ancient cultures of Africa, as it is being discovered at the moment, is the oldest source of civilization in the world. It has been discovered now through anthropological studies that all the cultures that exist in the world originated in Africa, and from there they move into the Middle East, into Western Europe, into Asia, and from Asia to the United States. From what is now the United States, before was America. No, it didn't exist for the Western mind, the Americas, because they have not been discovered. They were discovered only by a sailor from Italy in the 1450 or something like that, only 500 years back. Before, we are not part of the picture. But anyway, the people had been moving from Africa into Asia, and from the Strait of Bering, they had crossed into the Americans, into what is today Canada, and then America and Mexico. And from there, through Central America, they went to South America, where they have developed also incredible cultures. But that's why you will observe that all the other natives in all these places, they look similar to African people, either because of a bit darker skin, etc. And all the studies that have been done prove that fact. Even in China, where also they have made studies of the codes, the genetic codes of the ancient Chinese groups, and they also have the same genetic codes as the Africans. So that point has been proven, that is, the origin is African, from there it went everywhere. Yet, in recent years, in the last 300 years, it has been colonized and dominated by the Western powers, especially the Europeans. And all the wealth and the people, even the people, because they can work with the hands and they helped in the plantations in the United States, they created the slave trade. They went to the villages, they captured everyone, they kill a few to instigate fear, and then they took them in chains and they took them to work for free in different countries. They took them to Asia, they took them to Latin America, they took them to the United States, and they have to do, slave jobs for generations. They were not pay anything, just simple food, and that's it. So it's the most horrible crimes and genocides have been committed from these countries that considered to be so civilized. Well, and that has been the domination of the majority of the world by smaller groups. And now all that is starting to change because we are so interconnected in the planet, and the wealth starts to get distributed because nobody can survive with their own resources. We become very interdependent, that we need the oil from one country and we need the manufacturing from another country and the technology from another country. That interrelation has brought the Asian countries to the point where they say enough is enough. We don't want you to continue making decisions and stepping over our rights, and we are treating or giving orders and exploited and robbed with neo-colonial mechanisms. That is exactly neo-colonialism is done through the enterprises. And they come with the corporations, they extract the raw materials, they pay a pittance to the governments of the place. Normally they try to promote and to support dictatorships because dictators will do what they order them to do, and the people, well, forget about the people. They can survive in whichever way they want. And that has been the story of Africa until very recent. And now the African countries are waking up to this new reality. They have expelled the neo-colonial powers in good proportions. They are demanding right prices for the merchandises, and the whole situation is changing. That's why there is turmoil in the world. And now all these countries that they are not the Western countries, the colonial powers, they are getting organized politically in a different manner. That is the multipolar world that the Chinese and the Russians are promoting, where each country has to be treated with respect and equal partners. And they all have to sit around the table as equals, not the Americans or the British telling them what to do, or the French in the Sahel, here in Africa, there in Africa where you are, they have been manipulating and controlling the political regimes, for years. And now those countries have rebelled and they have expelled them and they have said, no, not anymore. And of course, there is lots of excitement, and they are creating wars then in Ukraine against Russia, and they are challenging China and threatening to take Taiwan, that has been part of China, forever, and has been accepted by the West. But nevertheless, they keep creating conflicts, and conflicts also against North Korea and instigating Japan also to control the traffic in the Pacific Ocean, well, etc. In South America, the same thing. They are trying to dominate countries that are rebelling. Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, countries that they don't want to have the manipulation of the Americans, politically and otherwise. So the world is changing, and is changing thanks to the progress of technology. And so we notice, because I am taking too much time in my explanations, but it gives a bit of context. We think, therefore, that we have to organize these forums to explain the ideas of new humanism. We explain all these things that I am briefly mentioning to you, the history of the last couple of thousand years at least, and how really this situation, because of the increase of the numbers of population, because of the advancements of technology that connects us all in a way that never before the world has been connected, in a way that, for example, like now, we are thousands of miles away and we can see each other and speak to each other as we were sitting in the living room. Not quite, because really the communications are still not robust enough, but almost there. In a couple of years' time, the communications will be much better because they are launching so many satellites of communications that practically we will have satellites for our exchanges everywhere. And that will be robust and that will be solid, and we will be able to do lots of things over the screens. Paula was saying, but nobody has taught me about these things. My parents don't teach. Well, in a few years' time, we will be able to teach the same as you go to the school to learn on your living room or in your study room at home. And you will have the material sent to you and you will be able to look at them and to start from your desk. And imagine the progress, imagine the speed of development for everyone everywhere. You will be able to work from home because so many new skills will be required that they will not need the man in the factory. That is part of the past. The technology will be such that the robots will be in the factories doing manufacturing, and people will be doing all the services, all the designs, all the things that require a different type of input. And we are moving into new technologies that they are going to cover the whole world. Of course, if things are moving in that direction, we cannot continue killing one another. That is absurd. Emphasizing the differences. We'll have to accept all the beliefs, all the races, all the cultures, all the manners of being, because we will all be in contact. You cannot go in cities where you take a bus, for example, here in the UK, and you look around, and half of the or more, or 60% of the population are colored people from Latin America, from Africa, from Asia, from India, from all over. And then you see the proportion of white Brits are very few because it's a real distribution of population in the world. Because the population of the United Kingdom is 60 million, and the population of the world is 8 billion. So no doubt that they are a small part. And out of this 60 million population, 50% are from other races here in the UK. So yeah, the world has changed and will be the same thing everywhere. So we have to start seeing other people, not with prejudices of culture or other differences, but as human beings, the same as us, with the same feelings, with the same interests, with the same desires, with the same necessities. And that is something quite exciting. And that is happening. It's not pie in the sky. It's not fantasy. It's reality. That is the world in which we are living and into which we are moving every time faster. And that's the reason why we want to organize these regional forums within this year, because the order in the planet is changing so quickly that unless we start to spread out quickly the messages of nonviolence and humanism, then conflicts will erupt everywhere because people do not know how to deal or how to recognize the things that need to be tackled urgently. And also, because we, common people, the man of the street, if you want, we will have to be the protagonists. We will have to do our bit, talking to our neighbors, talking to changing ourselves, changing the system of relations. So it has to spread thanks to the effort of each one of us. If we expect the governments, especially the governments that are privileged in a particular country of Europe or in the United States or in Canada, or whatever, they will not do anything. They haven't done even the implementation of the human rights, as I am telling you, although they signed the papers, I mean, 70 or 80 years ago. They don't do it. And why should we expect that they are going to do it now? They will not. So we'll be we, the common people, who will have to say, this is enough is enough, and we having the understanding and having the connection amongst ourselves to keep it up and to demand that things are done in a way that is more humane and that respect our fundamental rights. And that is precisely the orientation of humanism. So we need to start, we need to have about, we say, to make it representative, 25% of the countries of the region. In Africa, as we have mentioned before, there are 54 countries. So that 25% would be what, 15 that we need? 15, 18 countries. And we are already with groups and with people that actively moving in this direction. We are about in that number. We have Angola, we have a list of the countries of the region where we have some sort of presence. And in these notes that I am reading, that Julius will send to you all a bit later, we will we have a list of countries. We say Africa, we have Zambia, of course, here we are talking to you, Kenya, Angola, where we have a member of parliament that she formed a humanist party, you know, Flobela Malaquias, and she has offered all her support to the forum. Namibia, Ghana, Gambia, Senegal, Guinea-Conakry, Liberia, Benin, Nigeria, Cameroon, Congo, Gabon, Mozambique, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and Egypt. Those are countries where we have from organized groups that are more identified and connected with the movement to countries where we have through Presenza, the news agency, or through friends or people who already have expressed the willingness to contribute to the forum, to participate, but not a very solid presence. But the number of countries, more or less, is there, where we know people and we can do lots of activity to promote and to organize and to link with people who could have an interesting participation in the forum. We would like to, since we are going to discuss the fundamental problems of our time, we should have people that understand these subjects very well. For example, somebody in Africa that is a strong supporter and with great experience in human rights. And when we discuss the topic of human rights in the forum, we obviously will invite in these round tables to that person who understands the subject and will be able to explain it from the interests of humanists, but from the perspective of his own or her own knowledge and experience. So like that, we will integrate the panels of discussion, and of course, we'll be filming everything, we'll be collecting everything, will be documented. So later on, we'll be able to study the opinions of all these experts from different African countries about solutions on about the tackling of the fundamental problems of, for example, the environment and how it affects Africa. Or we will talk about human rights and the same thing, or we will talk about education, or we will talk about spirituality, or we will talk about all the topics that are very important in our view, that I can name some of them. And also, because the content of the forum is not completely defined, we will be able to add or to remove some of the topics that I am explaining now. We say among other fields, Education, for example, is a very important topic where there are lots of lacks, there are lots of holes. The orientation of the educational processes is wrong, because as we were saying in the beginning, fundamental things that should be taught to our children since the inception in the system is precisely about nonviolence and the possibility of personal development. But nobody explains about these things. Sports is the maximum topic of development, physical development, because it's competitive sport is one of the specialities of the show business in the countries of the world. But you can be a very sport person and you can be very aggressive and violent, especially that is particularly stimulated in competitive sports. So we have to have different conceptions and to tackle even problems that we think are more or less solved. They are not. We have to tackle in different ways. Then media. What happens with the media that is all the time projecting false news and with narratives that instigate violence? You know, violence can be in the words, can be communicated, can be transmitted. Aggression and the instigation of violence. And when you control the media because they are monopolies, and all the time the speech is violent and the scenes that are projected and the pictures that are projected, people end up thinking that is a normal. The violence is a normal thing. And that, of course, that keeps instigating and reproducing violence everywhere. We have to discuss, analyze this type of problems. We have to talk about science and technology, how we can guarantee that science and technology are at the service of the betterment of society, to increase the quality of life of people, to use energy in a wiser and more appropriate manner that is not destructive to the environment. We have to talk about human rights, all of them, not just a few, because it's not enough to say, well, I will not kill anyone. It's not good enough. Of course, that is obvious. But there are so many subtle. Imagine human rights in what refers to gender. Gender was given for granted that all genders can enjoy the similar rights, but you have seen as being females, in many cases, all how you have been treated as second-rate citizens. There is so much violence, gender violence, that women have to suffer in the world. Now they are rebelling all over the world, and the situation is starting to change. And they are changing the laws, and they are changing this and that, but too little, too late. We have lots of work to do in that field. And now they are appearing all the subgenders, LGBTQ plus. You see, because people start to think what are their inclinations, what are their orientations, what are their preferences, and they say, why not? If it's my body, I can do whatever I want, and I am not damaging anyone. So the field of respect of the human right in terms of gender is changing. And the aggressive monogender that existed in the world is has to give way, and they have to realize that they cannot continue treating women in the way that it has been done. So that requires a profound cultural change that is already happening, but needs to go much further and much faster. And that is just to talk about one aspect of one of the human rights. But if you examine all of them, you will find lots of different permutations and need to be redefined. And the Charter of Human Rights, as it was in 1948 or 49 that was approved, it has to be reviewed and changed and made more specific. And the countries of the world need to commit themselves to really respect them and enforce them. So they have to be translated to the legal systems of every country. It's a very important reform about human rights. Then the environment, you see how we are facing horrible situations day after day in different places. We are creating an imbalance because of the way that we consume and we contaminate, and the emissions of gases into the atmosphere is breaking the balance of the planet. The poles, the ice areas are starting to melt, the currents of the sea are changing, the patterns of temperature are changing, and there are lots of imbalances that are creating natural disasters, affecting obviously the poorest people in the world. In Polynesia, for example, near Australia, the level of the sea is going up. And there are islands with important populations that live there in these areas of New Guinea, etc., Papua. And then they estimate that in the next few years already they had to evacuate areas of territory where they lost their houses and everything else. And they have estimated at what point they will have to leave altogether the traditional setting, the traditional place of living. And so there are enormous problems that need to be tackled. Then we have peace and disarmament. Imagine what an important topic, peace and disarmament, where there are atomic weapons capable of destroying several times the planet. So it's absolutely important to eliminate the nuclear weapons and to eradicate war and to prevent all forms of violence, because there is a risk of destroying the whole humanity. Poverty has to be eliminated. And there is evidence that it's possible to eliminate poverty. China, because they have the control of the Communist Party, that means they have a government that is very coherent and centralized. They have removed the last 50 million people that lived below the line of poverty. On the last 5 years, they have removed them out of poverty. They have provided housing, system of education, jobs, access to higher education and universities, all the infrastructure that people, according to the classifications that exist in modern days in China, what is above the line of poverty. So people need to be guaranteed that they have all the fundamental requirements guaranteeing by the social organization. That's why we form nation states, to look after, thanks to the organization and the payments of taxes and the distribution of resources, where we can look after the necessities of everyone. It's things that are common sense, that it seems to be understood by everyone, but the experience shows that they are not. Overcoming of violence, that we have been already discussing, social organizations, real democracy, and the function of the nation state. Real democracy means that they claim that they are democratic, the countries, the governments, but they are not democratic. Because if you have something that is abnormal in your region, in your village, or whatever, and you say, well, I demand that this is resolved by the municipality or by the state government or whatever, nobody will pay any attention to you. And you will vote, and you will have no influence in who the candidates are or how the votes are counted, and nothing. So really is formal, is as if it was a democracy, but it's not. And that model of formal democracy is what exists at best in the present world. It's a big lie, and that means that the resources of the whole society concentrate in the hands of a few people that become very rich, and the big majority remains very poor. And that is totally unfair, and that needs to be changed. Then we are talking about the financial world order, that they are so-called banks of development, that they really give loans to the country, and the interest that the countries have to pay for those loans are so high that really it's impossible to pay them back. And so there are a few rich countries that, because of these loans through the international banks, like the International Monetary Fund, for example, that they enslave them financially. And if they want additional loans to pay the interest of all the loans that they haven't been able to pay, then they say, well, but then you have to reform your education, has to be privatized, your hospitals have to be privatized, etc. So they bring private companies that they are behind money, behind profits, and the service that they had to provide, they don't provide. If you cannot afford paying, well, bad luck. Do something, get an insurance or something, they will say. It's horrible, because I have seen it. I mean, and as it happened in countries like where I was born in Chile, we had a beautiful national health service that had been developed over the course of years and belonged to everyone. And after the dictatorship of Pinochet, that was instigated by the Americans because they didn't want the socialist government of Allende that was elected in free elections to remain, so they organized a coup d'etat, a military coup, and after that they started to privatize all these services that belong to the people because have been built by the state with the resources of people. And today, if you don't have a private insurance and if you don't pay, you don't get assistance. Only the minimal, but nobody really cares. So it's really, really a violation of fundamental rights. And the countries move backwards instead of forward because of the system of the organization of the international finance system. That is something that the new alliances of countries that are emerging, like the BRICS countries, they want to change. And because they are the majority of the population, and because there are so many people, they have the GDP, that means the collective capital of the country, higher than the countries of G7, that they are the Western countries. So really, is people united can produce very important transformations, and the world of the colonial powers is receding, 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 and becoming smaller and smaller. That's why they are so desperate, organizing wars and trying to sell weapons and destabilizing different regions of the planet, and so on and so forth. So the crisis is accelerating because it's a moment of change, and because it's a moment of change, we need to communicate the messages of universalist humanism everywhere as soon as possible. That is the main motive of why we want to organize these forums in Asia and in Africa, who still do not know enough about universalist humanism. And we are going to develop new forums very quickly in countries that have already have them, in Latin America, in North America, and in Europe. And then the next year, in 2025, we will have for the first time a World Universalist Humanist Forum, a world one. And that forum will be permanent and will continue all the time, will be explaining the opinions of humanists about all the fundamental topics. And Presenza, that also will become very prominent agency because we'll be present in lots of countries and publishing in lots of languages. Presenza also will be able to have an influence and to become very important disseminator of the new thinking of universalist humanism. It's an ambitious project, but it's something that is we think is worth doing. It can produce in the right time, as it is now, a very important influence for change, because nobody in the planet is mentioning the things that we are emphasizing, or like Silo's teaching explaining that the sources of violence are in the consciousness of the human being, and therefore it has to be tackled in the first place there. And then we have to create the social order that corresponds to that more awakened consciousness in society. So it's a fascinating project that can represent a very important step forward for humanity. So we feel that we have a mission in our hands. I will stop there because otherwise it could be too much.
No, it is it's not too much, and it is probably the main idea with the monthly African Humanist Forum meeting now is to give an overview uh, of the world and the situation in the world, but with particular attention on this region, Africa, moving towards a regional forward forum by the end of this year, and then taking part in the next step of World Humanist Forum that will be realized in 25, possibly, and we don't know. This can happen faster or slower, but we have now some um, we have some target that can uh, guide our actions everywhere in everything we do from now on. Uh, and what will happen is that I will send out to all those who are connected to us in the African Humanist Forum. We will send this document, like this master plan, or I sometimes call it the constitution uh, of this new world order, or this new way of living, where the human being is put as a central value, quite contrary to what we have today, where the money is put as a central value. So, and then I will send some very interesting, just to strengthen the connection we have had to Iceland. In Iceland, we are working with socialists, young socialists, that really very much so share our sentiments and share our ideas of the universal humanism. And we had a meeting recently where Antonio and myself and we were placed there along with the young socialists, and this was very nice. Uh, uh, I think it can be a very good thing to watch and see how we can tune with other like-minded forces in the world. You know.
Yeah, Madalena was there also, no?
Magdalena was that, yes, she is a young woman. She is also in the municipal government, like she is a councillor in Reykjavik city, in the capital, and she is a very popular there with her views, and she is saying she is the president. She is talking there with in this video, and so we have the African direct link in her.
Yeah.
Yes. So then I will, as last words, come to the emphasis that has been and will be very much one of the things we are prioritizing, is this thing of education, humanist education. And there we are emphasizing on humanist education for children, especially. And what will happen is that I will try to locate. I know a list of people that have already started and are all and have, even in some cases, like in Zambia, been doing humanist education for many years, and then I will make a point of distributing the books Antonio was mentioning about humanist education for children. I have started to look about the curriculum and how this is handled, and it's very promising. It's very promising. So I will try to find, and also people can write to me or Julius at Islandia.is. Uh, no, Julius at Islandia.is. Yes, that is the email address if you want to uh, require about or ask about the books. So I'm very happy about this meeting, and if someone has last words or anything before we end.
Good evening once more. Just want to say I'm very, very happy
Yes.
to be here, and I just want to say it's a pleasure because it's been a while now. I've not been currently attending the meetings, which has been an issue. Why? Because I had a problem with my phone, and recently my WhatsApp was banned. I don't know why, but I've complained via email, and they say they are gonna. They've not replied me yet, but from a friend, he said it will take about a week before it gets open. So I had to create a new WhatsApp to get in touch with the group.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I, I want to say I'm very, very happy. Thank you so much, Sir Antonio, for the brief explanation for what is on the ground. And I want to also say thank you so much, Sir Julius, for the opportunity because you always keep me notified when it's meeting time. I just want to appreciate so much. And my minivar, it's been long hearing from you. I just want to say happy New Year to everybody. I really appreciate. I thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Trigger. Very nice to hear from you.
Thank you, Trigger,
Good.
and you are such a nice representative of the west coast of Africa, coming from Cameroon, and
Yes.
I'm very, very happy to hear you. And I have been following your great work there in the humanist movement in Cameroon. Yes, thank you. So, Miniver, you were trying to say something, or Max?
Yeah. Yeah, Max.
Yes.
Oh, it's me. I wanted to say thank you very much, Antonio, for the brief explanation of what was on the ground. And I would love to say, the moment you just started sharing, it was like a movie playing in my head. You get because it's more like let me just say in my year of birth, I would say we grew up in a time where things were normal. We grew up in a time where things were respected as compared to the way things are happening now. If I look at the way I grew up and how I'm looking at the youths who are coming up now, I would say they are too fast. They are living fast, and they are too fast, and because of the global changes, I would say because of the changes of things in the world now, so
Mm.
they are ending up losing their life at a tender age, of which there is more need of us now to begin to implement ideas on how can we reach them, how can we talk to them, of which I've loved how what Antonio has brought up. I'm
Exactly.
really
We have
happy
to
to
become
see.
all we have to become wiser or we cannot survive. No, that is the situation. No?
Yes, it's
It's a
very true.
challenge, but it's possible. We can do it. I think so.
Amen. It's very true. Thank you.
Mm.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Antonio and Julius, for the brief on how we are going to develop our African forums. We are ready doing that, and since we are already on the ground, and we are looking forward more, especially on the education of the young ones for those books. Thank you very much.
Great, Minerva. And now that you have time to read more in detail that those notes, they are like 9 pages that I went through very quickly. But if you observe things that you want clarification or suggestions that you have or ideas that occur to you or Maxwell, you immediately communicate. We have to be in a very sort of fluid dialogue in order to implement and perfect the model. I lost the sound, Julius. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Um, I think this is we are moving towards the end of the meeting time wise, but I think this is a fantastic start, and the rest will be created by increasing number of people that are have heard or integrate this new way of seeing things, like Max was referring to. And so I greet you all with peace, force, and joy. So we
It's
make
no
it a
problem.
meeting. Yes,
Take
thank
care of
you.
yourselves,
Yeah,
and we'll see you very soon.
yeah.
Also, I
And I
want
will.
to
Peace,
Okay.
Yeah,
peace,
yeah.
first. Keep force and joy to you too.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So now I will take care of ending this managing
Recording.
recording, and then we say here, stop the recording, and the recording will be saved in the meeting organized Google Drive. I'm getting very technical, so so I greet you and see you later. Bye bye.
All the best.